I keep looking at that clock and thinking, we got time. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a council workshop. That means I don't bang the gavel. We do roll, but we don't have public comments. I'm going to do a roll call in a second. Let's see who's here. I'm going to start from my left. Molly, I think you're here.
Yes, I'm here.
Jeff, I think, is here.
True.
Amber, I think, is here.
Here.
Leah's here. And Pam?
I'm here.
There you go. Hey, Dan.
Here.
Paloma let us know that she could not attend this meeting. I see the city administrator. And who do we have online?
Good evening, Mayor. City Attorney Nick Ward-Willis with Keenan Meeting tonight. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. And
Good evening, Jasmine Graham here from Mid-Hudson Energy Transition.
great. Natalie, are you on?
Natalie will be joining us shortly. She's
Okay.
the second
Yeah, she'll
item.
come in around 7:20.
Great. Okay. So first order of business is we have someone who is online, and that's Jasmine
Graham.
Graham from Mid-Hudson Energy Transition. Chris, do you want to do an intro and then she talks? Or
Sure. So we received an email from Jasmine a few weeks ago. She runs an organization called Mid-Hudson Energy Transition, which she can talk more about. And she had asked if the city of Beacon might be willing to partner with her organization on promoting community solar, a voluntary opt-in community solar program here. And we had talked about this a lot last year when we decided not to do the community choice aggregation, and we were trying to promote an opt-out community solar program. That hasn't been passed by the state yet, but this is available to it. So I invited Jasmine to come in and give us a little bit of an overview of this, and if you want to move forward on it, it's a way I think people can make sure that the electricity they use at home is greener, and they also can save some money. So with that, Jasmine Graham is the Executive Director of Mid-Hudson Energy Transition. And Jasmine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Mayor, and all council members. Really excited to be here. As was said, I'm Jasmine Graham. I'm the Executive Director of Mid-Hudson Energy Transition. We're based right in Kingston, and we're focused on really helping municipalities, their residents, and businesses to own and share renewable energy, create healthier buildings, and join in community wealth building. One of the biggest areas that we are focusing right now is on the owning and sharing renewable energy. And so we were selected by the City of Kingston to manage their clean energy programs, starting with community solar, folding in healthy homes, and even home energy loan programs. But we launched our first community solar initiative in 2023 in October, called Kingston Community Solar. And now we are expanding that to across the Mid-Hudson region, so that we can aid more municipalities in both supporting local renewable energy, bringing lower bills to their residents, and then also the opportunity to receive grants through the state's Clean Energy Communities program. So really excited to be here today. We've been partnering with a company called Power Market, which is really a leading community solar provider in New York State, on a new initiative that we're calling Mid-Hudson Community Solar. And this campaign essentially is really targeted towards the state's disadvantaged communities, and the city of Beacon has many households and areas that are classified by that state designation as disadvantaged. So there's actually 3,672 DAC households that would be eligible for this program. And the amazing part about community solar is that you are not only supporting renewable energy, but you have a guaranteed savings on your electricity bill. So every month, depending on how much solar is generated by the project, you're going to receive solar bill credits on your existing utility bill. And then you get a 10% discount off of however many solar credits are generated. And so it's always that 10% discount. Unlike other community solar options, one of the reasons why we choose to partner with Power Market is because they have a consolidated billing option, which means you're not receiving one bill from the utility and another one from your community solar provider. It's all coming in one. And, the 10% discount is really standard across New York. Some places are going as low as 5% now, but for us, we're really happy to offer the 10%. And so when I reached out to Chris, I was providing this opportunity to engage in this campaign, which has 2 available projects right now, a total of about 950 slots available. The 2 projects, one is in West Park, New York, and the other is in Red Hook. And that opportunity will be available across the Mid-Hudson. But one of the ways that is really, really beneficial to join a community solar campaign right now from a municipal perspective is that it opens you up to a lot of grant opportunities. And so NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, has the Clean Energy Communities Program, which provides grants for clean energy campaigns. And for community solar campaigns, they actually just recently increased the awards. And so if you get just 10 community solar participants in your community, you can get a $5,000 grant. If you get 50, an additional 50 participants, you can get a $10,000 grant. And then if you get another 100 participants, you can get a $20,000 grant. So all in all, for 160 participants, you're eligible for $35,000 in grant money. And as I mentioned, there's over 3,600 households just in the city of Beacon that are eligible. So those should be very achievable numbers to hit. So we're really excited. We have several municipalities that are interested, and essentially we want to send letters out to those households that are eligible and let them know that there's this option. These 2 particular projects are actually set to be finished with construction in March of 2024, so just a few months away. So there's not too much of a delay between when you sign up and when you start to see the credits on your bill. So it's a really great opportunity, and I'm just here to explain it and also answer any questions that you all might have.
And if I could just add, I have personal experience with Power Market in that I did community solar at my home through Green Street Power Partners to support a solar installation over in New Windsor. And basically what we're doing is by subscribing, you're helping to provide the financing to finish these projects. And then the more people that do it, the more projects they can do. It's been seamless for me. It's all on my Central Hudson bill when I get my Central Hudson bill. But otherwise it was pretty good.
Yeah, I think that was, I also am part of a community solar program, although I have the separate billing, but that's okay. My question was really around what would be the next steps here? So it sounds like we've already identified the eligible population. Is there something that Mid-Hudson Energy Transition already has planned to reach out to them, or is that something the council needs to approve? What would we do from here?
I was looking for guidance from the council if you wanted to proceed. Jasmine has already provided a draft letter, and if you want to participate in this with them, they will send out the letter at their cost.
Okay.
So we would just take the letter, put it on the mayor's letterhead, send it out, and then we would put it on our social media and website so that people know it's a real thing.
Sorry, last question for now, and then somebody else. Is the program only available to the approximately 3,600 eligible folks that Mid-Hudson Energy Transition identified, or is it open to anyone in the community?
So it's open to any of those disadvantaged community households, also anyone who's low income. But we've spoken to our partners at Power Market, and they said don't wait to subscribe if you don't know if you fit the criteria. They have, availability in other community solar projects locally in Central Hudson Territory. So they'll still try to place anyone, even if you're not eligible for this particular project. But the mailing would go out to those already identified populations, because, we don't want to get folks' hopes up and send it out to everybody. We want to focus on the folks that are eligible first.
Sure, thank you.
Of course.
On that note, can you share a little bit more about, if people are wondering if they are eligible, any more of the criteria that might make someone eligible?
Yeah, so the state has, it was actually the Climate Justice Working Group of the state went through a long process to identify what they call disadvantaged communities around the state. So they are geographic areas. So if somebody types in NYSERDA, which is NYSERDA, disadvantaged communities, if you just Google that, the first link that pops up will be the NYSERDA website, where you can type in your own address and see if your locality is, your particular household is eligible. But also, if you're on any assistance programs, the Home Energy Assistance Program, SNAP, anything like that, we would be able to easily get you into the program as well, even if you don't fall within those typical geographic bounds of a disadvantaged community.
Thank you.
And community solar is open to anybody that wants it. And there are purveyors like Nexamp and Green Street Power, which still have subscriptions available. I know the one that I'm in still has 40 openings. So if people that want to do this and they don't get a letter, they can just do a search of community solar. What this does is it really helps people who generally might not know about it find out about it, feel confident that the municipality is behind it, and then the state is really supporting the buy-in of this through the grants as well. And if we had, they're small grants, but again, we're looking to put our own solar on the highway garage, and I would say anything that we raise from this, I would put towards that to defer the cost.
And if any individual had questions, we have an email address set up that is midhudson@powermarket.io. You can also email them with any questions. You could always email me, jasmine@mid-hudson.energy. So we're happy to work with folks on a one-on-one basis too, if they're having any trouble signing up or, want to know if they're eligible. We're kind of here to help. So, feel free to also just reach out if folks have questions.
I'd like to ask a question, if I might. I'm a bit of a nerd on this topic, so forgive the depth of this one, but as an alternative to the opt-out community solar market that the state is not allowed and may not likely allow through private companies, they're doing the Solar for All benefit program to benefit low-income and disadvantaged community members. Is this program stackable with that benefit if it does roll out to disadvantaged community members in Beacon? If they're doing your program, could they also reap the additional 5% benefit of that program?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I would be inclined to say probably not. The same way that they don't allow folks who already have solar on their own roof to quote unquote double dip and also be in a community solar project, I would imagine that they probably wouldn't allow stacking of two community solar offerings. But if that one is 5%, right, then we would know that in our case we have a 10% discount, and it would probably be, at least from an economic perspective, more advantageous to be in the higher discount program. But when that day comes, we'll definitely look into it.
Can I just ask, there's no cost for joining the program, or is there a fee, or?
Correct. There's no cost to join. There's no fees to join, no fees to leave. And the discount continues for 20 years. So it is, I would say, a very good deal, if I do say so myself.
So I appreciate the the outreach component of this project. I think it's a really important one, and I think it's the hardest for us to do as a city. We have, in the last year, had a number of companies, I don't know who they were, kind of walking door to door and soliciting people, saying that they were Central Hudson's clean energy provider, and using some kind of iffy language and asking people to, show them their bills and stuff. So there might be you might encounter a little distrust in the community if you're reaching out to people who've already had those folks knocking on their door. Have you encountered this before, and how do you plan on working around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've encountered this in every community I've ever worked in. We've kind of always run up to run up on the bad behavior of others in the past. I think for us, the biggest reason why we partner with municipalities is because it is a trusted source, right? And so, we're a not-for-profit. We're in this mission because we care about the climate, we care about people, we care about health and safety. So for us, it's not about making money. We just want to bring the benefit to as many people as we can. And working with trusted partners always helps with that. So it really helps when it comes from the mayor, when it comes from the city council, when it comes from the city administrator, right? When it comes from a local pastor or a community group that folks are really engaged with. So that's kind of how we operate. We make sure that we can be fully vetted, that you all have all the information that you need to know that we're the right, partner to go with. And then really let the community kind of decide. And we also understand that for some folks, they've been harmed too much, and, they're going to say, no, I'm going to pass on that. Or I want to see someone else do it successfully first. And we understand that, we're not in the business of really selling energy. We're really just trying to, provide an extra benefit. So for us, I would say, in conclusion, we've seen that every single time, and we understand it. And it's kind of, at this point, unfortunately, really normal in the clean energy sphere. There's been a lot of solicitations and kind of shady tactics.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
I wanted to ask, how much communication do you give to the customer, especially to be able to contact you? I know, previously, when we had it through the city, it was kind of like it just ended when everybody ended. So if they wanted to get out, is it clear for them to understand who to contact?
Yep. So Power Market, our partner, manages all the subscriptions. So you can contact them by email, by phone. They have Spanish language customer service as well. So those are folks that are always there to help, normal kind of call center hours, 9 to 5. It might even be a little bit later in the evenings. I can check on that, but you can always contact them or us, right? So part of the benefit of working with a trusted nonprofit is you always have an advocate, right? So I know that you wouldn't have any trouble reaching Power Market. They're very responsive. Their customer service is amazing. But if there ever was any questions or hesitations, you could also come to us as Mid-Hudson Energy Transition.
Any other questions for Jasmine?
I think the stackable question is one that I don't. Are there other programs that this could or could not stack with other than other community solar programs? I don't know the full breadth of all the different offerings out there, but did we address all the possible stackable options? I just don't want to end up where we're using one thing and then it limits our options in the future. And I don't know really, but
So the important part that we didn't mention is that this is stackable with your own supplier, your own electricity supplier. So just as you all previously had a community choice aggregation, and that is, bulk purchasing, presumably renewable energy for your electricity supply, that is fully stackable with community solar. So any individual can go out, choose their own energy supply company, or do it as a group with their municipality, and then also layer on community solar. I think where the issue of stacking is when you're trying to layer, more than one community solar program, right? You
see.
couldn't sign up with us, sign up with Nexamp and the next company too, right? And say, well, now I have a 50% discount. I would love that, but you are limited at this point to just one.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Jasmine, I appreciate your time. Anything else from either you or from Chris? You're good? All right.
Nothing
Appreciate-
else on my end. Just want to say thanks for having me, and looking forward to working with you all.
All right.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'll follow up with you this week.
All right, sounds good. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all we're covering on this, right? We wanted to hear her presentation.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'd be interested, do you know the percentage on Solar for All? I pulled it up, and it said it could be $5 to $15 a month. Is it a percentage, or it's a flat fee?
They're targeting a percentage, basically, like a 5% benefit, and they're estimating that $5 to $10.
Got it.
And this is going to be the integrated community solar program that they're planning on doing through the utilities, which spreads it across the whole state for low-income folks, which is why it's a lower level.
Okay,
And I do think I think it is designed to be stackable, which is just an additional benefit.
got it. We actually stack our own electricity. We buy from Enesco.
Meaning the
and-
city?
The city.
Yeah.
And, well, 70% of our electricity comes from the solar farm on Dennings Avenue, but on the part that we buy, we have an ESCO that we have we bid it out some years ago, and then we also have community solar on that from an entity up in Ulster County. We piggybacked on Ulster County's contract with this firm.
Okay.
Do you want to proceed with it? What's the sense of the council?
Speaking for myself, yes, it seems like a good fit. And I take Dan's point, there might be something in the future, but hearing that also it might be stackable with other things, and it seems like it's a here thing now that starts in March, so I see no reason not to.
It doesn't interfere with anything, and the fact that they're structured so that you can back out of it without a penalty or cost at any time means if something else comes along, it is something that's easily removable. So it's no reason, I like it a lot because it just reduces hurdles for decision makers who are often too busy to make a decision, and they can just reap a benefit by, seeing something that the city has endorsed. So I'm in favor of the program.
I'm supportive.
Others?
I'm supportive if the people more knowledgeable than me are supportive.
And I am too, of course.
Okay, thanks. We'll
Yeah.
get working on it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you all.
All right, next one is minimum parking requirements. So let me start, because we had a lot of information from before. I just want to remind people of something I passed out to, I didn't pass out, but I passed this piece of paper out to council members that were on board. I'm not sure everybody was, but this was from NICOM. It was in their August 2023 book that they sent to everyone. It was called 5 Practical Zoning Hacks for Missing Middle Housing. It said these thoughtful tweaks can promote housing diversity and density in communities of all sizes. And the 5 hacks were reducing minimum lot size, I like that, allow more housing types and revisit structure sizes, level the playing field for smaller units, that means allowing smaller units, reduce or eliminate parking minimums, and then allow missing middle housing everywhere if possible. Now, I'm going to just read the parking minimums. So parking expert Professor Donald Shoup of UCLA estimates the U.S. has set aside 2 billion parking spaces for just 250 million cars and light trucks, resulting in far more land dedicated to cars than housing. If you want the missing middle housing, you need to fix your parking standards. We've done a better job delivering houses for cars than we have delivering houses for people. If you require more than one off-street parking space per unit, it's not economically viable or physically possible to create missing middle housing or infill lots. Instead, opt for 1 parking space or even none per unit and no guest parking. In suburban or rural areas, driving might be a fact of life, so they were kind of saying, if you're a suburb, that may not always work. I just wanted to pass that along. And then what I would suggest in our discussion is obviously we should just start and see what people thought. There were a lot of comments. You know, some of them I don't think added up, but there were a lot of professionals also adding comments. But we might want to structure that after initial discussion into thinking about single-family first, where there's a definite proposal, and then looking at the developments versus Main Street, second and third. Okay.
And Mayor, just for the people at home who don't know what NICOM is, we've been asked about our, to spell these out, New York State Conference of Mayors,
Right.
of which the city of Beacon is a member.
So the Conference of Mayors represents all cities and municipalities.
Cities and villages.
Villages, but not towns. And so there's about 500 or 600 cities and villages in the state, mostly villages. So I just wanted to start there. I can keep going.
I mean, I have kind of like three main questions or areas to think through. I'm sure there's a whole bunch more just based on some of the comments. The first one was if we have a way to address or somewhat direct where these perceived savings go to ensure that there's a public benefit, and that affordability really is an outcome of this legislation. The other one was something that I think we heard from the Planning and Zoning Board, and I think that this is not necessarily specific to parking, but is there anything additional that we can do to support our boards? Because there seemed to be a feeling that there's all of these hired consultants that are coming in front of them, and that they don't have the ammunition to, I guess, debate those studies. And I don't necessarily think that's specific to parking, but a commentary I heard. And the third one was around, again, kind of revisiting where we've been in terms of accessibility. I think we know that we aren't in the suburbs, we are a city, but how can we further some of the ways for people to access areas of Main Street without necessarily needing to have a car every other block? Is there a way for some of these savings to go into a fund for a parking structure? Essentially just thinking about, I know Pam did a lot of work on the Main Street Access Committee. We have a 10-year-old parking study. There's a lot of recommendations in there. So what else can we do to support saying that we know we have a problem with parking sometimes on Main Street? How do we make it easier for people to visit this area, to be residents of this area? I think those were kind of the three buckets that I was thinking in.
Okay. Yeah, I thought, and I'm interested in those. I think we also heard from boards, and I think we've made some adjustments on flexibility, and I think there was some concern. You raised it sort of board support concern, but it's sort of like, can we give them some standards that they can use in the absence of some expertise? And I think that's really relevant, right? Because I think we grasp the concept of eliminating the minimums. I think some of the experts, we had a couple people who know about planning talk to us, and it wasn't like they objected to eliminating the minimums as much as how do we make it work when those are gone?
Yes.
And I'm interested in that area. The one that I think can resolve pretty quickly is just looking at the single family, because there we have a standard, and so we don't have to worry much. I think all we need to do is look at the table, and it says, okay, for one family, now the current minimum, the current minimum is 2, the proposed minimum is 1, and the proposed guidance for a maximum is 3. So that would be a single-family home would move from a minimum of 2 to a minimum of 1, and a proposed guidance maximum of 3 seems pretty reasonable to me. I'm okay with that. So I'm just wondering on others.
How do you do a maximum? What if you had a really long lot with a long driveway, and you have to do a long driveway, and you can fit 7 cars?
I understand, but that would be up to the house to determine what they would do, as opposed to us imposing the requirement that you need this many parking spaces in a single-family home, right, above 3.
Okay, but we're saying you can't have more than 3. We have a parking maximum. So you couldn't have a driveway that could fit 7 cars, because then you would be, am I misunderstanding the parking requirement for off-street parking? I mean, if we had a maximum, I would think you would have to limit how much paving you have.
So, Nick, help us out on that one. So is the maximum that would be here, the maximum that could be imposed by the planning board or by the city in some fashion? Or is it the maximum they would be permitted to do regardless?
Well, so the intent is not as the example Dan used, a very good example, to say that you can't have if your property is a flag lot, that you can't have a 200-foot driveway and then park on that driveway space. It may need some tweaking in light of Dan's example, but the intent is that the board could not go beyond those 3 spaces. The fact that it might park it because you have a longer driveway because of a flag lot, I think that's not what the intent of the law is.
So we just would have to clarify, Dan, right, that
Yeah.
this would be the most that they could require, but the builder or the owner could do additional,
Yeah.
right?
So in my ward, and probably others, there's this kind of thing where there's property behind other homes, so they build a driveway between 2 lots that goes, and so if you have a house in your backyard, and so that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, those are called flag lots because it looks like a flag, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in. Sorry, this is Natalie Quinn, planning consultant. Also just the whole driveway. I mean, if you look at the definition of a parking space, is that whole driveway is your access point. So that entire driveway is not going to be counted as parking spaces. So I guess, yes, in reality, someone could park cars all the way along their narrow drive, and use them all as parking spaces, but those aren't defined parking spaces, right? I think the code usually says that you can't drive through one parking space to get to another. So it's not like the whole driveway would be counted as parking spaces just because you have a 200-foot long driveway.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep, thanks.
Yeah, because again, I looked at the table, which I appreciate you putting together, so I don't have to find it. And it just seemed okay for single family, so I was wondering if we could agree on that. So can we stay focused on that piece and see if we have other issues on that?
Yeah, I mean, I also felt comfortable with the recommendations for single family that are in here, as well as ADUs for which there was no change.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Okay, so what we're saying is on the R1s and R2s, we're saying the current minimum of 2 for one family could go to 1 with a maximum that could be required of 3, and then a 2-family would currently go from 4 down to 2, but up to 6 would be the maximum that could be required. And then with ADUs, if you add an ADU, you need to add a space, and that's not changing, as Amber said. I think we're good with that, and I think that covers a lot and lets us focus down on a narrower set of issues. Is that okay? Keep going?
I think that was the easy spot.
I know, but I wanted to get that part out of the way,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I think there will be people who have thoughts about that, but I am fine with that approach, and I am curious to hear what people, if they focus just on that one proposal, what are the concerns they have, if they have any. So
Yeah.
I'm good for us proposing that as a next way to move this forward.
Yeah, and it's such a hard, I mean, it was like 17 pages with a bunch of cross-outs and a bunch of additions, and I struggled to read it, to be quite honest. And I think people reacted just sort of looking at it overall and the concept of no minimum. But I think if we help them understand what's in here, I think they'll be okay with this section, but there'll be some who won't, of course. Okay, so now it says, all right, we're dealing with larger developments, and then also Main Street. And in my head, I tend to separate the two because, Pam, that the Main Street Access Committee, I did ask them to look at whether we might need to go to some kind of a parking authority and parking structure and fees as a way over time. I think the Main Street Access Committee decided that there were a bunch of short-term and medium-term things to do first before we did that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be planning. But I think I would also separate Main Street from other developments in our discussion, if that's okay. And I'm happy picking up either issue first, if that's okay with folks.
Can we look at it not necessarily Main Street, but access to municipal parking? Because I feel like right now it's, for the most part, is Main Street, but it's, we're looking at changing laws for down the road. I mean, this is something that has been 60 years, that it's time for a change, but if we just kind of get stuck on saying Main Street and outside of Main Street, I think we need to look at it, is how close are parking structures to these properties? Is that something to look at, what parking is accessible within a certain distance?
Well, so traditionally, the Main Street buildings developed, at least our historic ones, with no parking because people didn't have vehicles, right? Or if they did, they weren't motorized. So it seems that where we have parking structures or parking lots and municipal lots is along Main Street. But I guess what you might be saying is there might be additional ones over time that develop. Yeah, and maybe that means we say if we expect an area to develop a density level and not have to provide their own parking, that should be included in the half of the discussion of areas that don't have parking on their own, like Main Street and anywhere else where it's going to end up looking like that in terms of parking usage. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like Fishkill Avenue might, depending on what's proposed there.
It might, right? Yeah. Right, and if we develop in our heads a game plan of a parking fee system to build parking when it becomes necessary, then that would apply in any area where we think that's necessary. So it may not just be Main Street, it may be how we've thought about Fishkill Ave or someplace else, right?
So can you talk more about what's being considered or what's been discussed in terms of needing to build parking structures?
So I can tell you what's, and Pam, maybe you could add to this, but I had asked the Main Street Access Committee to consider short-term and medium and long-term, and the long-term might have been a parking structure, and to consider a mix of ways of raising funds, right? And so what I asked them was, you may want something that if a building doesn't have any parking, that they need to contribute something annually into some fund to cover parking, that residents who wanted guaranteed parking, a parking sticker, right, might have to pay a monthly fee for that benefit. And then, tourists, if you want them to contribute as well, you might want them to pay something as well. So that might be meters, or it might be some other approach. We didn't decide anything. I don't think the committee made any specific recommendations in that area that I recall. Was
For
there anything
structures?
Of structures?
There were,
Yeah.
the county parking lot and Henry Street.
Yeah, and also.
No, that's only though if the surface lots couldn't, there were 3 tiers to it.
It was phase
And
3.
it was like, if
Yeah.
you can't get it done by phase 1, go to phase 2. If you can't do tier 2, do tier 3.
Right. Was there a recommendation in that third phase of how to finance? That's the part I'm not sure was there.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we'd have to sort that, because I was hoping for it. I don't think it came. But I think we'd have to figure it out, because if we're going to build parking, and I know it's for the benefit of our Main Street or other areas that have density, we've got to figure out how to finance it, right?
Well, financing is one thing, but the issue for me is if we're, by decision of this law, we are driving towards a need for building parking. And for various reasons, not least for embodied carbon reasons, I'm generally opposed to it, especially because we might be facing a significant change in how transportation happens in the not-so-distant future.
Well, that's exactly what was said in the committee, right? Which is, that's another reason not to assume that we have to do it,
Right.
right?
And I think one of the points I was raising before is that, I'm also not jumping to, we should build parking structures, but I do think that there is some responsibility of the city to say, from a planning perspective, here are the things that we can do to help make Main Street more accessible for people, so that you can park in one lot and get all the way to the east end or the west end, or, and that doesn't necessarily mean a parking structure, but I think it does mean some planning and some process around what are we doing to make things work a little bit better for people.
Yeah, like the funding that we collect could go towards restriping or, striping some more side streets or some more signage, or maybe identifying another place where we have land that we could turn into a parking lot. But, I just want to back up a second. Is the suggestion that because Main Street will always have its parking waived, that they should always be paying into a parking solution? Is that what you're thinking, Lee? Am I phrasing it correct?
So I haven't gone there, right? And the reason, I was kind of hoping the committee would kind of think about financing. They didn't. But the comment that Jeff made, they also made, which is, don't assume we need it, right? Wait and make sure that we really, really do.
Well,
the other one that I saw in the report was that if we were to take one of our lots or two of our lots and turn it into housing, we might need to take another one and make a parking structure, right? I did see that in there. And I don't know. I honestly don't have a clean view on what we should do here and whether, we should start a charge, for instance, from buildings that don't have parking into a fund dedicated for some purpose, which might be transit, which might be parking. I think that's separate from this law, but I think it's something we should be thinking about.
I don't know what it, and just I think a clarification, I think that's part of what I was saying. It's like, let's wait and see, but it's really more about a need for a more comprehensive discussion about these possibilities in the not-so-distant future. I don't want to get too abstract about these conversations, but one of the concerns I have is that we have not had a comprehensive conversation. It's one of the first things we talked about in our conversation the first time this came up, that, this could be, I don't want to kick things down the road, but I feel like a more holistic planning discussion with more engagement with the community would be beneficial. What I've seen in the comments is it's pretty diverse in terms of the opinions right now. And I think it's oversimplifying it to a fair degree, opinions on both sides for what seems very simple in one respect, but there's complexity to it.
And I do just want to refer back to the Beacon City Center parking analysis, in which they do discuss some ways to fund these improvements, one of which is a payment in lieu of parking system that captures, for somebody who is unable to meet the requirements, it's payment in lieu of parking, and that goes into a Center City Benefit Fund. There's a couple of other things, I'm not going to read the whole, but I think that's a valid idea.
I think it's a very good idea. Because right now, the parking's getting waived and we're getting nothing in return.
Right.
Yes, and then that kind of goes back to the question that we were hearing from the public of how do you ensure accountability? Like, again, we don't want to make it so unaffordable that you'd rather build parking spaces, but we also want to hold people accountable to doing the right thing and providing public benefits. And if they can't do that, then we create this Center City Benefit Fund, and that creates the public benefits.
Mm-hmm. We had it where you had to pay if you didn't have the parking.
Yeah, but it was $1,000, I think. It was a small amount, but I think we stopped doing that. Do we know?
I just remember it years ago.
You took that off your books a while ago.
Yeah.
With a business that ended up leaving because they couldn't get their business going because they had to pay for that park. It was just like, because it was a small kind of mom and pop shop.
I remember that too, Pam, and I do remember the fee being, very insubstantial, and I do also think that we stopped collecting that, I want to say at some point before 2020.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
It's definitely been a while.
So can I suggest, since Natalie, our new planner, is listening, that I think one of the topics that you just got assigned was to start thinking about Central Main Street District parking considerations and possible funding mechanisms, and not just parking and accessibility, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just say, that one of the best things I think about this, the new legislation, right, is that there is reference to, I know that there was a lot of conversation during the public hearing about consultant reports. I think, and I understand those comments that often you have consultants referencing the IT standards and stuff like that. I think one of the best things about this new proposed law is that it does ask you to look at more local data, right? Looking at projects and parking utilization. So you're almost through this the planning board is going to start collecting unique parking utilization studies for projects in the downtown area or in the project area, right? So, and that's what the planning board is basing their demand off of, is off of that kind of real local beacon data, which is helpful. And then to the parking, parking in lieu, or payment of fee in lieu of parking, I think absolutely there's a few communities in Dutchess County, Westchester, and in the area that utilize that, and that can absolutely go towards more than just structured parking. And I think a lot of the recommendations that came out of the Main Street study, improve signage for your parking, bump outs to improve walkability, on-street parking that slows traffic on Main Street, all of those things are going towards a more walkable environment in Main Street. And then this reducing the parking minimums or removal of parking minimums is just one more tool to, again, start making the downtown more walkable. So happy to look into that. I think there's a few pieces of that are already being addressed by the city and that are addressed by the code, but I think I can definitely do some research for you in terms of how other communities are using payment in lieu of parking.
Thank you.
That'd be great.
But I really like this idea, but I also think the original idea was that we would be saving developers money so they would build affordable housing. So now that we're charging, we may potentially do payment in lieu of parking. How does that free up funding for affordable housing?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, we've got several different considerations we're trying to sort out. I think it might be, and again, I'll look to Natalie for some help, that if you charge for it up front, it might make sense if you're doing a non-Main Street thing because you're building from scratch. But on Main Street, most of the buildings are built. If someone's changing a use, asking them to cover parking up front is a really big nut. And it may be that a annual thing may work a little bit better.
Mentions quarterly billings to ease resistance from.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Right. So, maybe that's part of the approach, is instead of thinking of in lieu as a single payment up front, that you kind of spread it out.
Okay.
Again, I don't know, because I don't think that addresses, I don't know how to fix affordability. I think we have to think that through as we consider this issue, which is a little different than our parking requirement, but that issue.
Mayor, I'd also note that the parking fee in lieu of would likely be less than the actual cost, so there would still be some savings passed along. For example, in 2008, when the city of Beacon repealed its parking fee in lieu of, that fee at that time was $1,500 per space.
Okay.
And that was found to be excessive and a burden at that time on development. And we also provided the council a memo back in 2015 that I'll circulate and provide to Natalie as well, that has some other code provisions.
Yeah, and then you'll often do, a lot of communities will do like an increasing fee, right? So, well, I think considering not just one large sum up front is going to help this be not a barrier to the development of housing, right? But I think a lot of communities also, if you're waiving 1 or 2 spaces or 3 or 4 spaces, that's a lower fee than, say, if you're doing a very large development, you need to waive 53 parking spaces or something like that, then that would be a higher fee. So there is like an escalating scale that I know a few communities like Yonkers and Poughkeepsie utilize. So yeah, I can definitely pull that information together. I think the other thing is, I just, a lot of the comments that I've been hearing make it sound like parking, if you remove the parking minimums, parking won't be provided. I think these parking studies that are going to be presented to the planning board, developers are still going to provide parking if they can, if it's possible in some areas. They're just going to provide a right-sized amount of parking, A, because their financing institutions are going to require that, but B, also because they want their developments to be successful, right? If they don't think they can get away with no parking, and if it's not a walkable environment, and there's not a demand for units that don't have parking, they are going to want to provide parking so that these units get occupied. So I just want to reiterate that, and I know this for a fact because I'm working on a project in Kingston where there is a 0 parking requirement for the site that we're working on. We're still looking at how much parking we need to provide to meet the needs of our residents because we want the development to be successful, right? So just because you remove the parking minimums, I don't think that means that there's not going to be any parking provided ever. So how many spaces are being waived also, would be up to the planning board, and what they determined is the necessary parking for a development. So I think employing this kind of reduced parking minimums or eliminated parking minimums with some kind of fee, it could, it continues to ease the cost and the burden of overproduction of parking.
And Chris, if I'm reading, so I requested some information about like what's happening with parking, and if I'm reading this information that you provided correctly, at least in the last year or so, there has been a mix of waivers for sites, but also parking being added, even when there was a waiver. So if I look at Fishkill, it says they got a waiver for 10 parking spaces, but 53 were being provided. So I think that's, going back to 2020 and 2019, a little bit different, but I think to Natalie's point, if we look at what's happening today, we're doing waivers probably because we have to, but it's not necessarily for everything. And so I would theorize that if we were to say, okay, you no longer need to request this, waiver to get away from the minimum, we would still see that opt-in to providing spaces where they can. And I think that's something we would have to monitor to see if this is working as we think it will.
Yeah. It doesn't go from, if you get rid of the minimum parking, they're not going to go from, well, we would have been required to have 60 spaces to we're providing none.
Right.
I think what we've heard from developers is that they want it to be successful. If I could also just mention a couple things that should be in the consideration of Main Street. The pages 19 and 20 of the Main Street Access Report talk about the surveys that they did on parking. And one of their main conclusions was that if you look at the Main Street as a system, it has enough parking. It's constrained in certain areas in peak times. And so the recommendations that they made were actually very good, and we've implemented a number of them. Firstly, putting signage because people didn't know they could park at certain lots and they didn't know how to get to it. Secondly, painting parking kiosks, parking spots on the streets so that people parked more efficiently. They didn't block driveways, which was a problem sometimes, and they also had an indicator that they could in fact park on those. The other thing that is a change that's pending with the transit system, which was to make the loop bus operate more like a trolley so that you really could have a circumstance where people went down, parked at the river, which is free on weekends, and used the free loop like a trolley. So in June, and again, I'm trying to have transit, Dutchess County Transit, come and talk about the changes to this and the two other lines in Beacon. It would basically go up and down Main Street, making it so that you didn't have to know the schedule or even where you'd get it. You just can get the bus anywhere and move around that corridor.
That's great.
There's still some room to implement further on side streets. We've done the first block, maybe we haven't done the second block. You'll see we did paint diagonal parking spaces on Henry Street, and we picked up a half dozen parking spaces there. We redid Eliza Street. Similarly, we got extra spaces when we redo Fishkill Avenue later this year. We're going to pick up 5 or 6 spots on that. So everywhere we can, we're trying to build in that capacity.
Yeah, when I look at that parking assessment that was done in the map, not surprisingly, all Main Street is full, which is why you need to enforce the 2-hour parking limit. I don't think you need to get to parking meters as much as just enforce the 2-hour parking limit. And then the other ones are behind Brothers, right, along Van Nydek in that section there is very full. And then around the bend into the Churchill Avenue parking lot is always very full. And we should be thinking about maybe trying to help in that section. I don't know how we would do it. I will make an admission against interest. So commercial properties, including apartments more than 3 units, pay the higher tax rate, so their taxes are already 50% higher. There might be a pretty valid argument that we should be doing some of this on our own because of that higher tax revenue that they pay. and I'm mindful of it. I'm also careful on how we spend our money, so.
Just to explain what I'm doing, and I'm multitasking over here, I'm counting the roll calls of the planning board for Kingston. You know, I'm mindful of the split that we had with our planning board on this issue, that it was 3-2. And it falls upon them to be the decision makers about what happens here. And it was largely unanimous for many issues. They met 4 times in Kingston, the planning board, to go over this because of the density of the issue. But they did a nice summation, and except for one person, it seems like on a couple of issues out of more than a dozen, there was unanimous consent to proceed, so food for thought.
Interesting.
Can I switch this to, I know we've talked a lot about Main Street, we're connecting it to, parking and fees. If we flip to the development, so the single family and the non-Main Street, the one example that we were just given information on in Bruce's memo is 152, 158 Fishkill Avenue, the one on the corner of Conklin and Fishkill. And they're required to do 53 parking spaces.
Is that property?
I think it is.
Or is it the one,
No,
that's-
152, 158 is across from the
the gas station?
the gas station.
The Salvation Army.
It's
Closer
closer,
to
it's
Main.
closer into Main Street. It's where the car detailing place is.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to figure out what this was. Because it would help if we had a table like this one for single family that said, in multifamily, what's the current requirement? If we're eliminating it, then we can think about it. Because the one thing I was thinking we could do in that one is we could impose a minimum, or alternatively, we could suggest a target or a starting point, as a way of providing some kind of guidance that is less than the current, but not necessarily required, and maybe the planning board could go below it if they find the right, ways to reduce usage or go higher, as I was trying to work on how do we work that issue.
I like that approach. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Right, I don't think we could solve it tonight unless we knew the numbers, but I think if we had a table like this, we might be able to kind of work our way through that one.
Sure.
Well, we do have another workshop, because we moved the public hearing. We have 2 workshops for this, right? Okay, yeah.
Natalie or Nick, did you kind of hear what we were suggesting, which is for a multifamily development, is there a way that you could just array, what does it currently say, how do you calculate currently, and then we could work from there?
Yes, we can provide that.
Yeah, along with that specifically, the couple of ones that have been approved recently, I think it's multifamily up above, but then office space down below. So I think also that office space, and there might be some key definitions of office space and how they dealt with parking that might also be relevant, like common things that have been built recently and may be built in the future.
Yeah, I think that is the other right example, because they would each have their own parking requirements, the downstairs and the upstairs.
Yeah, and they've talked to the planning board about combining them in times of day, but I don't know how much they would appreciate having a standard in which to kind of hang their hat on as they make specific determinations, so.
Yeah, so I'll consult with Jennifer Gray, our planning board attorney, Natalie, and Bruce and Chris, and we'll come up with a chart of some examples that provide you information similar to the format we provided for the single-family, two-family, and ADUs.
If we can we come back to so we're talking about non-Main Street multifamily now, right? So I think on Main Street, by waiving the parking, I think you're not taking as much away from the public, because a certain percentage of the folks on Main Street, whether they're going to businesses or going home, are walking or bicycling, because Main Street is very easily accessible. But as we get further away from Main Street, people are more dependent on vehicles. Maybe you have 2 kids, or maybe you're having mobility issues, and people are more inclined, I think, to drive. So I think when we start taking away the parking minimums away from Main Street, I think we actually start taking something away from the public, and I think that something should be given in return. So I'm inclined, I like the question that Amber asked, how do we actually connect the savings of removing, I forget the cost estimate of the $25,000 parking spot, is that what it was, 25,000 for a spot? But if they are saving money by reducing the number of parking spots away from Main Street, that maybe they're giving something back, like affordable housing, maybe more commercial space than is required in that zone, to create jobs, maybe some of the other things that we talked about when we did that fourth floor law. But I would like to see a connection between the reduction of parking requirements to the provision of public benefits, to the extent that my colleagues would like to discuss that further.
Yeah, I think that's an important tie-in. And again, I'm not sure if everything belongs in the parking, section of the code,
No.
but I do think that these are things that are important for us to consider and important for the public to hear us thinking about, because these are directly in response to, I think, a lot of the commentary that was raised. So while it may not end up being in that specific code of legislation, I think it's an important consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we can do a law that updates different parts of the code too.
Yeah.
Well, I think it bleeds in, because I'm not sure how it, Amber's comment that I'm not sure it's all about the parking law. I think we want to pick that issue up, and I think we should try to pick it up discreetly, which is there a benefit we can offer to someone doing a large development for additional affordable? And, now we require 10%. There is no give back. That's a very rare statute, apparently, we've learned, that very few, if any, communities require the 10% with nothing in return. So if we, have to offer something to get a higher percentage, we might want to pick that up as a separate issue and then make sure that we kind of see how does it fit with parking as well, right? Because I would like us to kind of consider that. All right? So have we gone far enough for tonight, which says, okay, we did the easy one, right? We said single family, two family, not hard. We asked for some information on Central Maine, on parking programs, and we asked for some information on non-Main Street multifamily development. Should we stop here and then collect that for the next discussion? Does that work, or should we keep going?
I mean, I feel that information would be helpful for the next part of the discussion, but welcome other inputs.
I'm ready to move on.
Okay. Enough for tonight? Cool. This was a really rich discussion. I was really
I have one more thing, and I don't know, it sounds like actually, Natalie, you might already have connections about this. I am curious to know, Kingston's process took 3 years, and part of the planning board coming to a most consensus, like what were the supports they got, if any? I'm assuming they got some to help them feel comfortable and empowered to actually implement this successfully. So did they do a comprehensive parking study in Kingston before the launch of this? Did they do other things to prepare the planning board? I would kind of like to learn from them as well, just as we kind of look to not just pass this, but implement it, so.
I can definitely ask the planner up there. I know for a fact they did not do a parking study, because I've been looking for that information to utilize in my project. But I can see what else they might have done up there to kind of get folks comfortable with this, or if it was just kind of following the best practices. But I can ask and definitely add that to my research.
Great.
I would also note, it's my understanding that Kingston did this not as a standalone review of its parking requirements, but as part of a overhaul of its zoning to provide form-based coding. So that would explain the 3 years. It was more than just parking, as I understand it. It was an overhaul of their zoning ordinance to go from a textual-based zoning code to a form-based code like what you have for the CMS zone.
Got it. All right, and then just to record it, the request on the non-Main Street multifamily is just tell us what the requirements are today, and then also both for a standalone residential, but also a mixed commercial residential, so that we can kind of play with whatever the formula is for the mixed commercial residential. And then also think about how might we give guidance to the planning board so that if we remove those standards, they're not just, subject to whatever studies somebody brings to bear, but rather that we might offer some guidance in the statute, or there might be some way to refer to guidance. We'll look for your help on that.
I'd be interested in knowing, I'm interested in knowing whether, there's all these studies in the planning board that the applicants bring, and I'm not sure to what, I know that they get reviewed, but I don't know with what rigor. I'm interested in how other planning boards and other communities review these materials, because I've seen some of them, and I've seen dishonest ones, and I don't know how they get vetted by other communities. It seems like it's a cost, but I'd really love to know if we're doing everything that we can as a city to review those materials that we get.
I'm not clear from the conversation that the board is aware of this, but we do have a traffic consultant that works for the city that can be called when there are questions at the planning board. So we've used Creighton Manning for a number of years, and I know we're working on redoing their contract. So.
Okay. I know we were talking about having a joint meeting also with the zoning and with the planning board, and I'd like that to happen before we I think it would be helpful to move forward, to have that discussion.
Okay, so we have time. We're not on a deadline on this. So how about toward the end of February? So the workshop in February, the second one, because the planning and zoning board meeting will be done by then. Can we shoot for that? And we'll ask them if we can. If not, it'll probably be the March, that same workshop, right? Because they meet the second and third weeks of the month. Is that right? I think they do.
Second and third, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll look at one, see if we can get it in the second half of February. Okay.
And you're thinking after the workshop, or at the end of the workshop? Or?
Yeah, we could tag it on, right? Like do an hour.
Okay, I just didn't want to, I don't know if I can be here earlier than 7. So
okay.
That's what I'm asking.
We'll send out an email to the council as to a target date, and we'll make sure we can do this. We could do it a different day, but I was thinking we just tag it along.
Well, historically, the planning board really hits their stride in the 11 to 12 a.m. hour, so.
That is hopefully changing.
Yeah, so they're comfortable. We'll have the meeting from 12 to 1.
Yeah, let's start at midnight.
Oh, bless them. All right, good. Thank you all, and I appreciate you guys taking on the to-dos, Natalie and Nick, all right?
Thank you.
Couple of other items, and I'm happy to chat with you both if you need any further guidance or just want to talk through what would work, all right? And then,
Thank you.
And then, Chris, can you take on, or someone take on scheduling as well?
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, okay. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, we'll let you know. So the third one on the list.
Thank you, Natalie. We're good for tonight.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you.
The third one is an interesting local law. It's amending grievance day for complaints in relation to property tax assessments. Nick, you're going to tell us why we're off by one day, right?
I am, and we're going to blame leap year for this. So the New York State Real Property Tax Law states that grievance day, the date by which one can file their complaint board to grieve their property assessment and/or appear before the grievance board, is the fourth Tuesday in May for cities and some other municipalities, certainly in Dutchess County. The real property tax law also provides that if you share your assessor with another municipality, as Beacon does, that the legislative body can designate another day as the grievance day. That grievance day cannot be any earlier than the fourth Tuesday of the month. So when the law was adopted in 2017, it was designated as following Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday of the month. That worked great until you come to leap year, or this year in particular, and I'm sure it will happen in other years, when there are 5 Wednesdays in the month. So the fourth Wednesday actually comes before the fourth Tuesday, and under the law, you can't have a grievance day before the fourth Tuesday. So
Oh, yeah,
It's a long way to get you there, but that's the explanation why we're making this minor modification, so that we're in conformance with the real property tax law when a resident files a grievance. So it will now read that the Wednesday immediately following the fourth Tuesday of May shall be a grievance day. And you need to hold a public hearing, there are no referrals required, and there's sufficient time for this to be adopted for this, to take effect this year.
So Nick, can we just start with how did you find this? How did you guys realize this was a problem?
Yeah. So I can tell you when it occurs. It occurs when the first of the month is a Wednesday.
Right.
There isn't a preceding Tuesday.
I know, I was just wondering how they caught that.
I know.
Like, were they looking over the calendar, or?
Yeah.
It was through staff, and Chris, I don't know, others in my office were involved, so I was not. I couldn't tell you the exact, but I believe it was in discussions with staff who raised it.
Maybe Ben figured it out.
Funny. Oh, yeah. Well, and I have a serious question. I thought we had some discussion last year about expanding grievance day to maybe more hours or more days, no? Did we not?
So under the law, so you spoke about that, and what was discussed is that Kathy is required under the law to sit with the role, meaning she has to have public office hours where the assessment role is provided for the public to come in and meet. It can also schedule appointments with Kathy to meet when you can have a mutually agreeable time. It was discussed that Kathy would sit with the role both during a weekday as well as on a weekend to provide other opportunities. But under New York State law, grievance day can be adjourned. The board itself could agree to adjourn and hear grievances on another day. But under the law, that grievance day itself can only be one day because people need to have a date certain by which they have to file their grievance. And if it were scheduled for 2 days, someone might wait to file it on the second day. New York State law says it has to be on the first day. So grievance day itself can be any day of the week, but it can only be one day.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okey dokey.
Nick, did you say this would come before a public hearing because it is a change to a local law? Is that what I heard
That
you
is
say?
correct. It requires a public hearing.
Okay, great, thank you.
That will be scheduled at your next meeting.
I look forward to the comments.
Okay. Moving on. Next one is the appointment of Jeffrey Crawford to the Conservation Advisory Committee. You've got his resume. It's very interesting. He works on environmental issues for a living with companies. ESD, is that the lingo? Not DEI, but ESD, right?
ESG.
Yeah. Right, ESG. So any issues with that, let me know. But otherwise, and he was at the last council meeting as well.
Yeah, I just want to add also that Jeffrey came to the last How Do I Electrify event and was really informative and knew a lot of stuff about incentives for the public and was very well informed and engaged, yeah.
Cool.
I'm always impressed with the varying talents we have here in Beacon, so that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you should have seen the people for the Main Street Committee. There were a number of architects or planners or, people with urban expertise, and it was refreshing to see, so.
My only concern with him is that he's younger and smarter than me.
We'll change the code.
The younger parts could apply almost 100% with me at this stage. Anyway.
Mayor, I just wanted to add that we did receive a letter of support for this candidate also from the current chair of the CAC, and that he has attended a prior meeting. I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, the last one is the tax cert settlement. It involves 30 Beekman, and Nick, you're going to tell us what all this means.
Thank you, Mayor. So tax cert is a legal process by which owners of real property challenge their tax assessment in court. And this concerns a real property located at 30 Beekman Street, which is the View, which is a condominium. And this concerns 7 particular units at the top floor of a penthouse who challenged their assessment. There were a number of conferences between our office and the applicant's attorney, that the property owner's attorney. It resulted in a resolution that is significantly below what they were seeking in the refund, but does result in a refund and a reduction in the assessment that Kathy Morton finds is in line with, upon being presented with information from them as to actual sales and where they were in the construction process, is suitable and agreeable and a reasonable reduction in their assessment for tax year 2023. 3, resulting in a refund of city taxes of $15,587.10. And you'll see in the resolution, there's the reduction in the assessed value for each of the 7 units. And this would be on your council agenda for next week to approve that tax surcharge settlement.
Any discussion?
No.
Are we done for the night?
Motion to adjourn?
Well, can I just ask, I always wait for Amber to say that before I ask one question.
I do that just to get your last question.
We work well together. How do we address the impact of this on the budget when we discuss at these tax certs? I mean, I know that we have our total tax levy and we deal with it that way, but, you know, if we had a plan where we were counting on this money, what do we do when it gets reduced like this?
So
Oh, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, the taxes are collected, and we do, when Susan is preparing the budget, we do have a discussion with her and Chris about what potential tax settlements might be coming forth, and there's a line item in the budget, I believe, that addresses that potential.
Okay, thank you.
And not every line item is fully used in a given year, so we do have a little bit of flexibility.
Sure.
If this was, a much larger number, then I would worry about it.
Okay.
And I think that line item did actually, the line item set aside for these kind of settlements increased from what it was the previous year. maybe
We also
anticipating,
carry
so,
some money in contingency.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Second.
Motion by Amber, seconded by Dan. All in favor? Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Good night,
And our
everyone.
next meeting, Mayor, is when?
Our next meeting is next Monday, right?
February 5th.
February 5th.
All right.
All right, good.
And there's public comment. It's a
Yes.
City council meeting with public comment.
Yes, absolutely.